Welcome, everyone, to Ohio Unsolved. I'm your host, Matthew, and today's episode is about the murder of Joseph Augustus Zarelli. So let's just get into the story. Everyone sit back, make sure to lock your doors and windows, and get ready for Ohio Unsolved. Joseph Augustus Zarelli, previously known as the Boy in the Box, was a 4-year-old male whose nude, malnourished, beaten body was found on the side of Susquehanna Road in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, on February 25, 1957. Joseph appeared to have been cleaned and freshly groomed, with a recent haircut and trimmed fingernails, although he had suffered extensive physical attacks prior to his death, with multiple bruises on his body. He was also severely malnourished. His body was covered with scars, some of which were surgical, most notably on his ankle, groin, and chin. The authorities believe that the cause of death was homicide by blunt force trauma. Despite the publicity and sporadic interest throughout the years, the boy's identity remained unknown for over half a century. On November 30th, 2022, the Philadelphia Police Department announced that detectives had determined the boy's identity using DNA and genealogical databases. On December 8th, 2022, more than 65 years after his body was found, he was publicly identified. Despite the identification, the exact circumstances leading to his death are uncertain, and the case is still considered an open homicide investigation. On February 25, 1957, Zarelli's body, wrapped in a plaid blanket, was found in the woods off Susquehanna Road in the Fox Chase neighborhood of Philadelphia. The body was discovered by a young man who was checking his rabbit traps. Fearing that the police would confiscate his traps, he did not report what he had found. A few days later, a college student spotted a rabbit running into the underbrush, and knowing that there were animal traps in the area, he stopped his car to investigate and discovered the body. He was also reluctant to have any contact with the police, but he did report what he had found the following day after hearing of the disappearance of Mary Jane Barker. The naked body was inside of a cardboard box that had once contained a bassinet of the kind sold by J.C. Penney. Zarelli's hair had been recently cropped, possibly after death, as clumps of his hair clung to the body. There were signs of severe malnourishment, as well as surgical scars on the ankle and groin, and an L-shaped scar underneath his chin. The police received the report and opened an investigation on February 26, 1957. The dead boy's fingerprints were taken, and police at first were optimistic that they would soon be identified. However, no one ever came forward with any useful information. The case attracted considerable media attention in Philadelphia and Delaware Valley. The Philadelphia Inquirer printed 400,000 flyers depicting the boy's likeness, which were sent out and posted across the area. and were included with every gas bill in Philadelphia. The crime scene was combed over and over again by 270 police academy recruits who discovered a man's blue corduroy cap, a child's scarf, and a man's white handkerchief with the letter G in the corner. All clues that led nowhere. The police also distributed a post-mortem photograph of the boy, fully dressed and in a seated position, as he may have looked in life, in the hope that it might lead to a clue. In 1998, his body was exhumed for the purpose of extracting DNA, which was obtained from a tooth. On March 21, 2016, the National Center for Missing and Exploited Children released a forensic facial reconstruction of the victim and added him into their database. The body was then exhumed yet again in 2019 to retrieve additional DNA samples. The child was an unidentified murder victim for decades. However, on November 30th, 2022, the Philadelphia Police Department announced that they had finally identified the child through the use of genetic testing and investigative genetic genealogy, and that they would provide a case update the following week. Sources stated that he was the child of a prominent family in Delaware County, Pennsylvania. Authorities also said that an investigation would use the new information to continue the search for suspects. On December 8, 2022, the child was publicly identified as 4-year-old Joseph Augustus Zarelli, born on January 13, 1953. Genealogists had uncovered his name more than a year earlier, in October of 2021. On January 19, 2023, the names of Zarelli's parents were reported. Investigators were finally able to identify him after a cousin uploaded DNA to a public database. Investigators subsequently encouraged that person's mother, a first cousin of Zarelli, to submit a genetic profile to GED match, which she did, allowing the investigators to identify his parents. A court order for the child's birth certificate was then made, which revealed the child's name and his parents' names, subsequently verified by DNA. This theory concerns a foster home that was located approximately 1.5 miles from the site of the body. In 1960, Remington Bristow, an employee of the medical examiner's office who doggedly pursued the case until his death in 1993, contacted a New Jersey psychic who told him to look for a house that matched the foster home. When the psychic was brought to the Philadelphia Discovery site, she led Bristow directly to the foster home. Upon attending an estate sale at the foster home, Bristow discovered a bassinet similar to the one sold at JCPenney. He also discovered blankets hanging on the clothesline that were similar to the one to which the boy's body had been wrapped when they found him. Bristow believed that the boy was the son of the stepdaughter of the man who ran the foster home, and that they dispose of his body so the stepdaughter would not be exposed as an unwed mother. However, the police established that all the foster children were accounted for, and a re-examination by police investigators confirmed that the family were likely not involved. In 1998, Philadelphia Police Lieutenant Tom Augustine, who was in charge of the investigation, and several members of the VIDOC Society, a group of retired policemen and profilers, interviewed the foster father and the stepdaughter whom he had married. The foster home investigation was closed. Another theory was brought forward in February 2002 by a woman identified only as Martha, accusing her mother of acquiring and killing the child. Police considered her story to be plausible, but were troubled by her testimony, as she had a history of mental illness. She said that her mother and father purchased a boy named Jonathan, who she claimed was the boy in the box, later positively identified as Joseph, from his birth parents in the summer of 1954, after which he was beaten to death and his body left abandoned inside of a box outside of town. Police were unable to verify her story. Neighbors who had access to Martha's house during the stated time period denied that there had been a young boy living there and dismissed Martha's claims as ridiculous. Forensic artist Frank Bender developed a theory that the victim may have been raised as a girl. The child's unprofessional haircut, which appeared to have been performed in haste, was the basis for the scenario, as well as the appearance of the eyebrows having been styled. In 2008, Bender released a sketch of the unidentified child with long hair, reflecting the strands found on the body. In 2016, two writers from Los Angeles, Jim Hoffman and the other from New Jersey, Louis Romano, believed they had discovered a potential identity from Memphis, Tennessee, and requested that DNA be compared between the family members and the child. The lead was originally discovered by a Philadelphia man who introduced Romano and Hoffman to each other, and was developed and presented with the help of Hoffman to the Philadelphia Police Department and the Viaduct Society in early 2013. In December 2013, Romano became aware of the lead and agreed to help the man from Philadelphia and Hoffman to obtain the DNA from this particular family member in January 2014, which was sent quickly to the Philadelphia Police Department. Local authorities confirmed that they would investigate the lead, but said that they would need to do more research on the circumstances surrounding the link to Memphis before comparing DNA. In December 2017, Homicide Sergeant Bob Kohlmeyer confirmed that DNA taken from the Memphis man was compared to the Fox Chase boy, and there was no connection. Joseph Augustus Zarelli was originally buried in a potter's field. In 1998, he was reburied at Ivy Hill Cemetery in the Cedar Brook section of Philadelphia, which donated a large plot. The coffin, headstone, and funeral service were donated by the son of the man who buried the boy in 1957. There was a significant public attendance and media coverage at the reburial. City residents keep the grave decorated with flowers and toys. The large headstone, when first installed, contained the words, "America's Unknown Child," with a plaque underneath reading, "Heavenly Father, bless this unknown boy." On January 13th, 2023, which would have been Joseph's 70th birthday, a new memorial containing his full name and image was unveiled, along with the addition of his name to the existing headstone. At a December 2022 press conference, Philadelphia Police Commissioner stated that Joseph's death is, quote, "still an active homicide investigation, and we still need the public's help." Law enforcement reported at the same conference that both of Joseph's biological parents are deceased, but the child has living half-siblings. At the same December 2022 press conference, Philadelphia law enforcement stated that Joseph had lived in the area of 61st and Market Streets. Quote, "I don't know what the neighbors knew or didn't know," said the head of the Philadelphia Police Homicide Unit. "The child did live past the age of 4 years old, so there would have been somebody out there that would have seen this child. Perhaps another family member that hasn't stepped forward. Possibly a neighbor that remembers seeing that child and remembers whatever was occurring at that particular household." In January 2023, NBC 10 Philadelphia reported that Joseph, quote, "was born to a couple that lived at 64th and Callowhill," although the channel stated it was unclear if he lived there long enough for people to even notice him. In January 2023, the Philadelphia Inquirer reported that Joseph's biological parents were Augustus John Zarelli, known as Gus, and Mary Elizabeth Plunkett, known as Betsy. I've noticed that my podcast is growing outside of just Ohio. So if anybody from Philadelphia happens to hear this and you recognize the name or maybe even the picture that's posted in the Facebook group, please reach out to the police department and let them know what you know. Maybe we can one day find the person responsible for that poor boy's murder. But on to our next story, which comes from yourghoststories.com, and it's one person's recount of strange and mysterious things that happened to them as a child. Since I was a small child, all kinds of strange things seem to have happened in my life. As a small child, I was playing in my room in the evening. When I looked at my bedroom window, I screamed for my mom. What I saw there was a face like the ones you see today of aliens. It had huge eyes. I remember those eyes giving me nightmares for many years. When Mom came to my room, she looked out the window and saw nothing. At that time, we lived in Kadoka, South Dakota, close to the Badlands. At around 15 or 16, my friend and I were babysitting on New Year's Eve. We knew that it would be boring after the kids went to bed, so we took a Ouija board along. We asked it all kinds of questions, and it would spell out answers. Kinda creepy, but you know how kids like that stuff. Anyway, the main thing that I remember from that night is that I asked it how many kids I would have. It spelled out, quote, one dead one. I freaked, but I asked more questions. I asked what it would be. It spelled out, girl. I also asked when she would be born, and it spelled out November 9th, 1969. Well, I had 2 kids. Remember, Ouija board said one dead one. Well, in 1969, I gave birth to a baby girl who passed away 4 hours after birth. She was born November 9th, 1969. So actually, it was right, because it said one dead one. I remember that night, after she passed away, I was on the 3rd or 4th floor at the McKinnon Hospital, and I had the eeriest feeling that someone was watching me. This was the spookiest experience of my life. I will never forget, nor will I forget the feeling that night after my baby had passed away. When I was 39 years old and married, we bought a house built in the early 1900s in Willow Lake, South Dakota. At first, everything was fine. Then strange, unexplainable things started happening. Cold breezes would blow across your face. My husband said he always felt something touching his feet in bed. And one night, he thought it was our little granddaughter, but he got up and she was sound asleep. He also said that when he got up in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom, that the hallway was always really cold. He always had the heat really high, and I hated it, but at night, the hallway was really cold. Well, he kept telling me how he felt something on his feet at night. I told him that he was crazy, because I was right next to him, and I felt nothing. We changed sides in bed one night, and I about freaked, because I felt something like fingers were moving on my feet, and that freaked me out. One night, I was in the same bedroom because I didn't want to watch what he was watching on TV. All of a sudden, my dog started acting really weird, and at the same time, I all of a sudden felt like a really cold hand on my hip. I ran to the living room into my husband's lap. He said I was as white as a ghost and wanted to know what was wrong. That same bedroom, one night my husband was away trucking, and all of a sudden I awoke to my 2 dogs growling. When I opened my eyes, I thought my eyes were playing tricks on me, because right in front of me, about the height of a person, I saw reddish-orange glowing eyes, kind of like deer eyes, glow at night, but these were reddish orange. I stared, and then I closed my eyes, reopened, and it was still there. I wasn't scared, because I thought that it was just my eyes. I would turn my head and see it out of my peripheral vision. Finally, I thought, to hell with this, and I turned the light on. There was nothing there, and the dogs quit growling. One thing I want to say is that this house had old windows, which were drafty, so I had totally covered the windows with insulation. Nothing could have shined in the windows. My 2 small grandchildren were staying with me one night. Colin was playing with cars in the middle of the living room, and Brooke was in the kitchen. I was in my recliner, about 4 feet from Colin, when all of a sudden he turns his head. "Who did that?" I said, "Did what, Colin?" He said, "Somebody was tapping on my shoulder." I told him that it was probably a bug flying around the house. Later, he was on the front porch playing, and he came running into the living room and told me something was tapping on his face. That same night, I put both of the kids upstairs in the same bed to sleep. They came running down the stairs as white as a ghost. "Grandma, there's a ghost right by the fan on the dresser." They had never heard any of what went on in the house. I kept it quiet because they were so young. I didn't know what to say. So I took Colin and I put him downstairs with Grandpa, and I took Brooke upstairs with me. That little girl would not let me turn the light off. She was scared to death. Now usually, little kids feel safe with an adult, but she would not lay down with the lights on with me there. We went downstairs. I had my computer room upstairs. One of my dogs always went upstairs with me. Every night around 10:30, Buddy would go into the hallway and start growling. There was nothing shining in the window, so I didn't know what he was growling at. The next night, I closed the computer room door, and sure enough, 10:30, he started growling at the door. This kind of freaked me out. I wondered what the hell was going on in this house. Now, I have a son, and he and his girlfriend, the grandkids' parents, would not sleep upstairs. My son told me that his pillow was pulled from under his head. I have 2 adult stepchildren who wouldn't sleep up there either. My sister and I were upstairs doing crafts one day. We had music playing when all of a sudden the music stopped and the TV turned on. We ran downstairs screaming. Her husband told us that it was nothing, but why would that happen? I stayed with my mother for 4 years, taking care of her at her home. She had ovarian cancer. I kept Mom at home until the day that she died. After she passed away, I would be in the basement bedroom. Maybe this was my imagination, I don't know. We had played Amazing Grace and other music for her when she was dying. After she passed away, I would hear music and sometimes footsteps upstairs. Made me have anxiety attacks really bad, so my brother came and moved me to his farm. I was up late one night at the farm, and I heard faint music, so I went downstairs since I thought Scott was awake. He had no music playing, but he told me that he and others had heard it before too. I've got one more story, and this one is about a potentially haunted house. When I was 12, my parents and I moved across town to a big, brand new, beautiful home. We were in a beautiful subdivision that had previously been a tree farm, and there was a large, man-made, but spring-fed pond in the backyard that was 6 feet deep in the middle. The pond is surrounded by protected wetlands, and there are a number of trees in the yard and a good deal of wildlife, including bobcats, geese, squirrels, and the occasional deer and coyote. The first encounter was a friendly sort. At least that's how I felt about it at the time. I'm still pretty well convinced that it's unrelated to the other things I've experienced in that house. This is because on the day that we moved into our new home, my grandma passed away. That night, I was brushing my teeth in my private bathroom, down the hall from my bedroom. The door unlatched and opened itself about 5 inches. I felt a friendly presence, and I smiled and said, "Hi, Grandma." A bit later, I went back to my bedroom, turned out the light, and hopped into bed. Just as I had gotten comfy and closed my eyes, the door unlatched and creaked open about 10 inches or so. I didn't feel scared at all, and I said, "Hi, Grandma," again, and proceeded to hold an entire conversation with her as if she were in the room with me. My grandma had had a couple of strokes when I was only 2, and she couldn't communicate very well at all, so I never got to know her very well during her life. These visits went on every single night, with both my bathroom and bedroom doors opening themselves, and only at night. Also, all the doors in the house were the same, but my doors were the only ones doing it. After about 10 days, I told my dad that there was something wrong with my doors, and asked if he could fix them so they would latch. Well, my dad is a terrible procrastinator. I expected it to be a while. After about a month or more of continual visits with Grandma, one night I decided that I was being selfish. When my bathroom door opened, I told Grandma how much these talks had meant to me, and that I knew that she needed to move on and enjoy herself now. I held my own little ceremony of sorts to say thank you and goodbye, and joyously sent her off. That night, I had just gotten into bed and was feeling happy as well as a little bit sad that I would never have another talk with my grandma. Well, just then, my bedroom door opened, not 10 inches, but all the way open, and this soft blue light filtered in. I could feel her presence come into my room, but it was lighter, like a joyful child. In my mind, I could hear music and hear her asking me to dance with her, and I got up and I danced very joyously for probably 10 minutes. It was so wonderful. Then we said goodbye. She visited me in my dreams that night, and we talked about very important things having to do with my life, but I couldn't remember any of it upon waking. I'm sure it went into my subconscious. After that, my doors never opened again. I told my dad a couple of days later, "Hey, thanks for fixing my doors. They stay shut now." And Dad said, "What about your doors? I never did anything to your doors." I beamed. I had so hoped that he would say that. Well, that was a lovely experience in my new home. Unfortunately, there were many dark ones after that. Nothing too earth-shattering or terrifying, but there were a couple experiences that still raise goosebumps when I think about them. To begin with, there were always the entities that came into my bedroom at night. I would be having a nice, peaceful dream and suddenly snap awake in a dire panic with every hair on my body standing on end and my heart pounding into my throat. I could feel the presence of something huge, dark, and tall standing at the foot of my bed, staring at me, and it did not like me. It always felt the same way. If I didn't get the light on and move fast, I was going to either die or be attacked. Of course, I'm sure I wouldn't have died. It was probably just their way of scaring the bejesus out of me. Well, it sure worked. Many times, I would lie there paralyzed with fear, too scared to reach my arm out to turn on the light, but terrified to find out what would happen if I didn't. It would always end in a mad rush to flip over and flail about in the dark from my floor lamp frantically trying to find the switch. Those 4 seconds always felt like an eternity. Some nights, I would wake up to find 3 or 4 of them swirling about above my bed, staring down at me and enjoying the look of terror on my face. One night, probably the most scared I've ever been on these particular nights, they were swirling around above me, and one of them suddenly swooped down really fast right at my face, and I pressed backward into my pillow while my heart beat out of my chest. It was about an inch away from my face. And finally, after a few terrifying moments, I leaped into a sitting position and fumbled with the lamp to get it turned on. I think I stayed up for at least a solid hour after that one. As I've gotten older, those experiences stopped. Well, I guess it's more just that I went away to college. I fought some depression during my teenage years, and that could be what attracted those beings to me at the time, and why they don't come around anymore. I'm now 27 and haven't lived with my parents in quite a while. But during my summers home from college, and more recently when I visited my parents' house and stayed the night without my fiancé, interesting things have happened. I feel that something has been toying with me, trying to perfect spooking me. My greatest fear of all time is somebody breaking into the house at night and killing me or my family. That has always been my greatest fear. Whatever this thing is, seems to have caught on to that. Sometimes during summers home from college, I would be reading in bed before going to sleep, and I would swear that I could quietly hear the screen door open or super soft footsteps on the carpet in the hall or in the tiled kitchen downstairs. Now during that time, I always chalked it up to my overactive imagination and my own track record with generally being hyper-aware and nervous at nighttime due to all the things that have happened to me at night. The screen porch door is downstairs, very close to where my room is upstairs. The family room, right there, has a 2-story vaulted ceiling, so it's all open and it's easy to hear when the screen door opens in the family room if you're just upstairs in my room nearby. But I now wonder how much was really my imagination, because this past summer I had 2 bone-chilling experiences on the same night that I will never forget. My fiancé had to work, but I decided to do a week-long stay at my parents' house for a nice visit. One night, I was lying awake reading late at night, probably around 1:30 or 2, somewhere around there. Suddenly, with no warning or prior noises at all, I heard this heavy animal or thing land on the roof toward the middle of the house and run super fast all the way to my room and literally right over my head. My room is on one end of the house. My head was leaning against the wall, and that is the far side of our house. I heard this thing's claws dig in and scrape as it leaped off the roof right over my head. Now, 3 things about this spooked me. 1, whatever that thing was, it was way heavier than a bobcat and way faster than any animal with paws that I know of in Illinois. It sounded like a mountain lion, which is, of course, impossible. 2, there are no trees close to our roof that have branches thick enough to support the weight of an animal like that, let alone even a raccoon, really. And 3, where on earth did it leap to? We have a very tall 2-story house, and there are no trees on that side of the yard. If an animal that heavy leaped from that high, I seriously doubt that it would make it without breaking a leg. Whatever that was, it left me feeling incredibly uneasy. I continued reading, and then, just as I was about to turn out the light, I heard the unmistakable sound of the screen porch door opening and the wind chimes outside blowing in some nighttime summer wind. The door banged softly against a stereo speaker that is against the wall close to my door. That happens only when the door opens all the way. My jaw was hanging open in shock. The door to my bedroom was closed, but I was terrified beyond anything I'd ever felt before. I quickly flipped off the light in my room so as not to attract any attention, and I dove under the covers, trying in vain to become invisible. It was as if they weren't even trying to be quiet. They seemed to have no fear. It sounded like there were 2 of them. They walked through the carpeted family room and into the kitchen farther away. I could hear their shoes stepping heavily on the floor, walking around as if they were checking everything out. I heard them open a few drawers and cabinets and shut them. They then turned around and came back toward the family room, sounding purposeful. The stairs were in that direction, and my heart felt like it was about to burst. I was so frightened. I was whispering every prayer I could think of, praying for my life, for the lives of my parents, and as I heard the footsteps coming up the stairs, I began almost hyperventilating. They slowed down halfway up the stairs and stopped, waiting. It was torture. I heard something clicking or clanking, as if they had guns. Then the steps started again, but this time they were very slow and quiet, like they were sneaking. They reached the landing and turned right toward my bedroom. I closed my eyes under the covers, and as they tiptoed right up to my bedroom door, I calmly closed my eyes and I got ready to die. I waited for it felt like a year, and there was nothing. Nothing, still nothing. I think I almost had a heart attack. I was clutching my cell phone in a vice-like grip, wanting to dial 911, but not wanting to give myself away. And then I realized that it had been 10 minutes. 15. I peeked out from under the covers. I turned my lamp on. Nothing. 20 minutes. I sat there in shock and I stared at the door. 30 minutes. Finally, with a trembling hand, feeling deja vu from all the nights I had done this as a teenager, I reached out and I turned on the light, and nothing happened. After several minutes, I got out of bed and wrenched the door open. There was no one there. I checked out the kitchen, the carpet for muddy footprints, the screen door lock, the family dog. Nothing was out of place or amiss, and the dog was snoring softly. I practically kissed the ground the entire next day. I was just so excited to be alive. So, those are my crazy stories about my parents' confusing house. We're the original owners. What do you guys think it could be? Well, that is going to do it for today. Thank you everyone for listening, and I hope that you enjoyed the stories. If you did, could you please rate and review on Spotify and Apple Podcasts? A 5-star rating really helps others to find the show. Don't forget to join us on Facebook, follow us on Instagram, and subscribe on YouTube. And once again, thank you all for listening, and make sure to keep those doors and windows locked, and stay ready for Ohio Unsolved.